La Biennale on Air. Welcome to La Biennale on Air, the official monthly podcast of La Biennale di Venezia. In around 30 minutes, we'll take you behind the scenes of a 130-year-old institution, uncovering both well-known and hidden stories. You'll hear from remarkable guests across all our disciplines: art, architecture, cinema, dance, music, theatre, and the historical archive. To understand the present, we need to revisit the past. So we'll bring you exclusive gems from the collection of our historical archive. But we're also looking ahead, spotlighting fresh perspectives and new voices. And yes, there will be surprises along the way. The January 2026 episode opens with Marina Abramović as we mark her approaching 80th birthday and explore her long-standing relationship with La Biennale di Venezia through archive materials and reflections from two exceptional guests. We then turn to architecture, where Carlo Ratti introduces Essential, the Olympic torch for Milano Cortina 2026, before moving on to theatre with Davide Iodice and his Pinocchio, ahead of the director's return to the Biennale Teatro 2026. We also dip into a magazine with Antony Hamilton, look ahead to the key dates of 2026 with a special horoscope, and close at the cinema with Classici fuori Mostra, celebrating restored films back on the big screen. This is La Biennale on Air. Welcome to the first episode of the year.
Biennale is always so exciting and so many things happening. I just been here in Arsenale. I'm only starting to look. I do performance last 45 years of my life, so it's very pleasant to see lots of performance. I always think it's not enough. We should have much more, much more. Performance is immaterial form of art, is one of the most powerful form of arts because it deals with direct energy with a human being.
Did you recognize her voice? Yes, it really is her. The legendary Serbian artist and performer Marina Abramović, a true icon of contemporary art, and a constant presence at La Biennale di Venezia. Over the years, she has left a profound mark on our exhibitions and festivals, from art to cinema and dance. She has never failed to attend La Biennale, even simply as a visitor, as she recounts in this exclusive statement recorded in 2015. With this newly rediscovered audio document from a historical archive, we wish to celebrate her in a particularly significant year. In 2026, Abramović will turn 80, and we wanted to begin the year by honouring her enduring influence on contemporary art. She will also be the subject of a major exhibition at the Gallerie dell'Accademia in Venice, opening during the preview days of the 61st International Art Exhibition this coming May. So, what has Marina Abramović's art and performance meant? And what do they continue to mean today? We put this question to two internationally renowned contemporary art curators, both former artistic directors of the Biennale Arte. Christine Macel, curator of Viva Arte Viva in 2017, and Cecilia Alemani, curator of The Milk of Dreams in 2022.
Marina Abramović, who will turn 80 in 2026, grew up in Belgrade in Serbia. She discovered Venice at the age of 14 while traveling with her mother and visited then her first Venice Biennale. In the 60s and early 70s, she became part of an artist group alongside figures such as Nesha Paripović and Rasha Todosievich. This group was influenced by conceptual art from Joseph Beuys to Vito Acconci. Abramović herself was strongly influenced by John Cage, and it is no coincidence that her earliest works were based on sound. She later developed works associated with body art before leaving Belgrade in 1975 at the age of 29. She then began her collaboration with Ulay. Together, they traveled across Europe in a caravan, creating their now famous duo performances. Her first appearance at the Venice Biennale was in 1976 with Ulay in the work Relation in Space Performance 1. Naked, they ran into each other repeatedly, colliding to generate a shared energy. More than 20 years later, in 1997, she was awarded the Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale curated by Germano Celant for Balkan Baroque, a work I remember vividly. It was a major piece that brought together all dimensions of her practice, performance, body art, sound, as well as her Serbian identity. I was struck by the sound and the smell even before entering the dark basement of the International Pavilion. I heard the music of Serbian songs from her childhood, but more disturbing was the sound of bones she was trying to clean while sitting on a mountain of 1,500 bones, still covered with flesh and blood. The smell was unbearable. It felt like an attempt to cleanse the collective conscience during the war in the Balkans, the first return of war to Europe since 1945. It was the most intense performance I've ever witnessed and the most remarkable work of the 1997 Biennale. Later, I remember her dancing tango in Paris with her gallerist, radiating extraordinary energy. For me, Marina Abramović is an artist who is able to bring together joy and tragedy with profound depth and spirituality.
In the contribution you have just heard, Christine Macel retraces Abramović's extraordinary artistic journey, highlighting her essential and unforgettable role in the Biennale Arte, with particular focus on the 47th International Art Exhibition curated by Germano Celant in 1997. Cecilia Alemani, in turn, takes us back to that pivotal edition when Abramović received one of the highest recognitions for her performance Balkan Baroque. Alemani offers a privileged perspective on this defining moment in the artist's career, weaving together personal recollections and a vivid evocation of a work that remains one of the most powerful and emblematic performances in the history of the Biennale, later revisited in the exhibition The Disquieted Muses, when La Biennale di Venezia meets history in 2020.
In 1997, the Venice Biennale was a place of frantic energy. The curator of that edition, Germano Celant, had only a few months to pull together an ambitious exhibition which he titled Future, Present, Past. It was in this tumultuous context that one of the most visceral performances of the history of contemporary art was born, Marina Abramovic's Balkan Baroque. There is a fascinating bit of behind-the-scenes history here. Marina was originally supposed to represent Serbia and Montenegro in the Yugoslav pavilion. However, the national authorities grew uncomfortable with the content of her proposal and rejected it. In a moment of curatorial brilliance, Celant invited her into the main international art exhibition instead. He gave her the lower level of the central pavilion, a windowless, underground space. It was damp, dark, and secluded. It turned out to be the perfect site for a special kind of exorcism. Imagine walking down into the lower level. The first thing that would hit you isn't the sight, but the smell. Marina sat atop of a mountain of 1,500 fresh cow bones. They were not clean. They were still heavy with blood and flesh. Dressed in a simple white lab coat, she spent 4 days, 6 hours a day, scrubbing those bones with a copper brush and a soapy water. The imagery was unmistakable, a mass grave. As the day went on, the heat of the Venetian summer took hold. The meat began to rot, maggots emerged, the smell became so overpowering that visitors could barely stand to stay in the room. Yet, the artist was present, centered in the middle of this decay, scrubbing. The core of the performance was a task of absolute crushing futility. As Marina knelt on that mound of bone, she wasn't just performing an action, she was trapped in a cycle of impossible labor. No matter how hard she worked, the bones remained stained. Her white coat, once pristine, became soaked in blood and filth. This was her searing metaphor for the Yugoslav wars of the 1990s, but it extends far beyond any single border. It speaks to the collective guilt that follows mass tragedy. Marina's message was clear and uncompromising. You cannot simply cleanse a nation of its sins. You cannot wash the blood from your hands once the killing has started. The stain is not on the surface, it is in the marrow. The labor of trying to forget or clean up history is exhausting and repetitive, and ultimately, it is a labor that can never be finished. To break the heavy silence of the scrubbing, she sang. She didn't sing anthems of war, but the folk songs of her childhood in Belgrade. Those songs brought a haunting tenderness to the carnage, a reminder that behind every ethnic conflict are the lullabies and memories of a lost home. I never got to see the original 1997 performance in person. Like many of you, I have experienced it through the fragments left behind. However, I had the honor of bringing a small piece of this work back to the Central Pavilion in 2020. That year, the world has come to a standstill due to the COVID pandemic. The Architecture Biennale was postponed and the Central Pavilion sat empty. Together with the other artistic directors of each sector of the Biennale, we curated an exhibition called Le Muse Inquiete, the Disquieted Muses, using the Biennale's own archive to tell the story of how this important institution has acted as a seismometer for history, recording the tremors of war and cultural upheaval throughout the 20th century. We placed the documentation of Balkan Baroque in a section focused on the 1990s, a decade that was supposed to be about borderless Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall, but instead became defined by the collapse of the nation-state and the horrors of ethnic cleansing. Standing in the same empty pavilion in 2020, looking at the footage of Marina from the 1990s, the work felt as urgent as ever. Whether you see it as a cathartic ritual or a public form of exorcism, Balkan Baroque transcends its specific time. It reminds us that history is not just something we read in books. It is something felt in the body, smelled in the air, and carried in our songs. Nearly 30 years later, as new borders are drawn and new conflicts arise, Marina's futile scrubbing remains a haunting warning. Some stains never truly leave us.
And now it's time for sport. In just a matter of weeks, the Milano Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics will begin. Only a few days ago, Venice also welcomed the Olympic torch into its lagoon. Named Essential, the torch has been passed from hand to hand on its long and emotional journey across Italy. Its creator, a name you know well, dear listeners, Carlo Ratti, Artistic Director of the Biennale Architettura 2025. In the following original audio, Ratti shares the genesis of the project, along with the creative and environmentally conscious ideas behind its design.
Hello, my name is Carlo Ratti. I'm the director at 2025 Biennale Architettura in Venice and also the designer of the Olympic torch for the 2026 Olympics. And what we try to do in the torch is actually similar to some of the things we've been discussing in Venice. Sustainability starts by using less. And what we did was use the minimum amount of reusable, recycled matter in order to do one thing, to put the flame at the center. This year's torch is about using less to say more.
Even though the next International Theatre Festival begins on the 7th of June, the Biennale Teatro never stops, thanks to the documentaries of Rai 5, the cultural channel of Italian national television. Next month, Pinocchio e gli altri, Pinocchio and the Others, will be broadcast, focusing on the production Pinocchio, What is a Person, by Davide Iodice, who was invited to participate in the Biennale Teatro 2025 by artistic director William Dafoe. The famous 1883 tale by Carlo Collodi carries many meanings that remain relevant today. In Iodice's interpretation, Pinocchio becomes a personification of all the incomprehensible or misunderstood features of teenage life, whose torments are the reflection of an adult society that is either a caricature of itself or in ruin. It is a deeply moving performance, staged by the Naples-based company Scuola Elementare del Teatro, whose actors have conditions such as Asperger's syndrome, Down syndrome, and various forms of autism, circumstances that can make someone feel different. This gives the question in the title even greater weight. What is a person? We asked Davide Iodice to describe how this delicate version of Pinocchio came to be. This is what he said.
After many misadventures caused by his anarchic spirit, the puppet Pinocchio is swallowed by an enormous shark. There he finds again his father Geppetto, swallowed up while searching for his son, a puppet, but so alive and incomprehensible that rejects every attempt to domesticate to normality, each time pushing away his father's desire and the society's will to transform him into a boy like all the others. Geppetto has one last candle left that will soon go out, and when Pinocchio asks him, and then Geppetto sinks into despair and finds no answer, and so Pinocchio himself, with his floating, driftwood nature, will save his father. And then it was precisely from this question that we started our Pinocchio. This is the question every parent of a disabled child continually asks themselves: what will happen next when we're no longer here, when the last candle has burned out? What will happen? Who will care for our extraordinary children? We created this show because the responsibility for answering this question can't just concern the parents of our disabled actors, whom I asked to be on stage with. It must concern the whole society. We are deeply grateful to the Venice Biennale for granting us such attention and visibility, and for providing significant support to a journey that began 13 years ago with the founding of the Scuola Elementare del Teatro, a free conservatory for the performing arts, a journey that now continues with their theater company project thanks to the support of an ever-growing number of people.
If you happen to be in Rome, you should know that Pinocchio, What is a Person, will be performed at the Teatro India from the 17th to the 22nd of February. Davide Iodice will also return to the Biennale Teatro this year with a site-specific performance. Details to be announced in the coming months. For those of you who haven't yet had the chance to read La Biennale di Venezia magazine, we thought we would give you a little taste of its content. To this end, we spoke with Antony Hamilton, the Australian choreographer and artistic director of the visionary dance company Chunky Move. Hamilton contributed an article to Raw Material, issue 325 of the magazine, in which he explored the idea of the extension of the self, explaining how stretching our bodies and minds can give rise to consciousness. Looking back at this text as a whole, what would you identify as its main themes?
The four main themes of the article I wrote begin firstly with how the extremities, the arms and feet, are deeply important to our connection with a sense of an outer world. We connect to the outer world primarily with the sensitive sensory appendages, the fingers and toes. That's how we meet the world physically. From here, the theme of an inner world in humans, what we would call self-awareness, from the inside, can then perceive and imagine things outside of ourselves, which gives us a sense of separation from our environment. But this idea is also quite contested in the text. The third main theme is really the ongoing, unanswered philosophical question around what is consciously willed or enacted by human beings with intention and self-awareness, in contrast to what is automatic or unconscious in us, what we do that we don't realize that we're doing, and where do these two possibilities rub? Where do they meet? The final theme is that if we do create consciously, then there is something common for me actually in all human creation, whether it has a physical form or is simply imagined. I refer to all objects from an arrangement of bricks, a toilet bowl, a knife and fork. Each of these is evidence of self-awareness manifest. So for me, it makes them art objects. In fact, quite sacred, important art objects. That is, if an art object or any object designed and shaped by human imagination is indeed a signifier of a kind of special self-awareness that humans possess.
You link the physical act of reaching for something to our inner state. How does that connection work?
If we consider the automatic movements of a newborn baby, we can possibly agree that electrical impulses causing a reflex action precede any self-awareness. So, movement is coming first in a way. However, I think that as human beings grow and develop, we can witness an attention develop in toddlers, for example, to external space and objects outside the body, and a desire to reach for them, possibly to develop the understanding of what they are. For me, it really is about that fourth main theme of the text, though, which is the notion of the sacred art object, and that being intrinsic to all of the things that human beings create. Self-awareness is manifest in our material shaping of an outside world, outside our bodies. So an inner sense is directly tethered to an outer sense, which is manifest in the materiality of the things that we create. So for me, human-made forms are these kind of absolute materializations of self-awareness.
You make reference to our past, suggesting that the need for self-awareness and the extension of ourselves have always been part of the human experience. Why is that?
I often refer to the past, and especially the deep past, as I tend to think human beings have more in common with our ancient ancestors within the primitive aspects of ourselves. And by that I mean the slower evolutionary changes of our biology and how that shapes our behavior, perhaps more than culture or technology does. In fact, I wouldn't stop at the idea of reaching being a fundamental action, important or necessary, not only to humans. Of course, all life forms have a version of reaching outwardly to go somewhere or to grasp something, even if it's a single cell organism moving towards another. I think we were certainly reaching before we were classified as human beings. And in my reference to automatism, automatism is to act without consciousness, although it was initially to act of one's own will. So it's quite paradoxical. But I think it's quite interesting that the notion of automata also gave rise to automatons, which is a kind of machine that creates movement of articulated figures, and this brings to life the inanimate. And in the earliest forms, automatons were machine-like dioramas, often of living creatures, humans and animals, or natural phenomena such as the movement of the heavens, animating these things and bringing them to life through movement.
Why is every artistic expression, in some way, a declaration of I exist?
Essentially, when I look at a building or a telephone or a notebook or a road or anything at all made by human hand, I innately know that a human being, aware of themselves, aware of their surroundings and their place within, was behind it. So the object kind of has the ghost of its creator in it. This is part of the machine mysticism that I always also talk about. So when I sit in my hotel room, for example, and I look at the walls and the windows and the carpet and the refrigerator, if I settle my mind and think deeply about it, each of these objects represents a voice saying to me, I exist. I imagine this outside of myself. I had a vision of an outside world and of myself as a conscious inhabitant of that world.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that at the beginning of every year, people from all over the world are drawn together by that beacon of light, capable of charming even the most skeptical among our acquaintances. Is it love? Is it religion? Maybe politics? Oh no, more than that. We're talking about the horoscope. Welcome to La Biennale Astrology, your guide to La Biennale 2026 events best suited to your zodiac sign. For the fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, the spicy, hot-tempered overachievers of the zodiac, nothing beats relaxing during the Biennale Musica. Good music, good people, good vibes. The only catch? You have to wait until the 10th of October for the 70th International Festival of Contemporary Music. But knowing how impatient you can be, we're pretty sure we'll see you long before then. At every event, probably. Lead the rest of the zodiac. We are ready. Here come the earth signs. Some of you are highly pragmatic. We're looking at you, Capricorns. Some of you constantly strive for perfection. Virgos, remember that perfectionism is a sign of a sick mind. Relax. Some of you are just, lazy. Don't be ashamed, Tauruses. We get you. Anyway, given that you're all hedonists, you probably appreciate beauty and art. So, 2026 is your lucky year. Starting on the 9th of May, you can enjoy all the art you want at the 61st International Art Exhibition. Check our website for early bird tickets. But keep calm, you don't even have to rush. There's time until the end of March. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, life would be so dull without you. You are free spirits. Your mind is swift as the air element that rules you. Some may call it a severe case of pathological distraction, but we see it differently. You are artists, trapped in walls you must break down. You change the rules with an optimism that Russian playwright Anton Chekhov would have called poorly informed pessimism. By the way, Chekhov was an Aquarius. As air signs, you're the perfect audience for Biennale Teatro and Biennale Danza, which begin on the 7th of June and the 17th of July, respectively. You are drawn to those who dare to be different, who express themselves unconventionally, who have something to say. You are expected this summer. Finally, we come to our beloved sensitive beings: Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, the water signs. You embody the full spectrum of human emotions. Thanks to your sensitivity, you empathize with the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is not a casual reference to a cinematic masterpiece. It's a reminder that you spend the year awaiting the Venice International Film Festival, your personal pool of new worlds to immerse yourself in. You don't just watch movies, you feel them so much, perhaps too much. Keep going, we'll bring the tissues. Of course, we're not finished. It's La Biennale, after all. Next month, the Biennale Carnevale 2026 will welcome all the kids of the zodiac. To celebrate, Ca' Giustinian, the headquarters of La Biennale, will be transformed into La Casa delle Creatività, the House of Creativity. The focus will be on sporting challenges and tradition through workshops with Olympic and Paralympic athletes from the Olympic Museum. And no, it's still not over. For those of you who remain skeptical or not entirely satisfied, that's fair. We can't make everyone happy, but we'll certainly try. Keep an eye out on our website and social media channels because the Historical Archive always has something in store for you. You won't be disappointed, especially in 2026. Okay, that's it for the horoscope. Starting on the 21st of January, every Wednesday evening at the Cinema Rossini in Venice, the history of cinema will meet local audiences through screenings of true gems from the 7th art. We are talking about the 7th edition of Classici fuori Mostra, the permanent festival of restored films, which will offer 12 screenings of the best cinema classics restored over the past year, running until late April. Introduced by experts, scholars, and critics, these events provide the chance to rediscover timeless films and, perhaps for the first time, experience some hidden treasures of 20th century cinema. The selection is curated by Venice International Film Festival artistic director Alberto Barbera, with the collaboration of film critic Federico Gironi. Thanks to Federico's insight, let's now dive straight into this remarkable program.
Once again, Venezia Classici fuori Mostra returns to Venice with a carefully curated selection of major works from cinema history, restored over the past year and presented at leading international festivals. A program conceived as a celebration of cinema, bringing back to the big screen films that continue to shape our way of seeing, feeling, and thinking. Our 2026 program spans from 1946 to 2000. The oldest films in our selection is The Wonderful Viewing in the Sun, the film in which director King Vidor and producer David O. Selznick pour an hot, erotic melodrama into a Western framework to create something unforgettable, featuring a famous kiss that has recently been mentioned by Martin Scorsese as one of the trademark images of his formation as a young cinephile. At the other end of the timeline stands Yi Yi, Edward Young's magnum opus, 173 bold and compelling minutes of an almost Altman-esque story involving various members of a family, their friends and their neighbors. a rare and perfect encounter between cinema and life, a film of discreet but powerful formal elegance, which always travels in a state of grace and balance between contrasting feelings and personal stories that alternate seamlessly. We have 4 Italian titles in our selection, starting with one of the great masterpieces of neorealism, the famous Risomaro, directed by Giuseppe De Santis in 1949, which launched the star of the then 18-year-old Silvana Mangano. La Finestra sul Luna Park, made in 1957 by Luigi Comencini, is one of the great Italian films of that decade that has not enjoyed enough celebration and popularity and deserves to be rediscovered for the dramatic power of its tragic story, told by Comencini through the point of view of a child and reflecting the struggle of families who left the south of Italy for the more prosperous and industrialized north of the country. While Il delitto Matteotti by Florestano Mancini is one of the great examples of so-called cinema civile, a chilling reconstruction of one of the darkest pages in Italy's history, Diabolic by Mario Bava shows us another way of thinking about and making films. Based on the famous comic, the film is still today one of the highest peaks of pop art and camp culture applied to cinematic language, mind-blowing, visually stunning, and extremely entertaining. Talking about genre films, science fiction, fantasy, and a touch of horror are the main ingredients of The Quatermass Experiment, directed by Val Guest in 1955 and produced by Hammer Films, while the iconoclastic spirits of the 60s explodes in Donald Cammell's and Nicholas Roeg's performance, a thriller that has been labeled as the pop version of Losis the Servant, with Mick Jagger in the lead role and performances by Anita Pallenberg and Michel Breton. Japanese cinema is represented in our selection with one of the finest films by a true master such as Mikio Naruse. The title of the film is Floating Clouds, a moving and masterful exploration of obsessive love set against the bombed-out landscapes of a devastated Japan immediately after the end of the Second World War. Unmissable is L'Horloger de Saint-Paul, the wonderful first feature directed by the great filmmaker, film critic, and cinephile Bertrand Tavernier in 1974. The story of a widowed father, played by a magnificent Philippe Noiret, who is forced to face a moral dilemma when his only son commits crime and goes on the run. And of course, American cinema is an important part of Classici fuori Mostra. The program opens with Thief, Michael Mann's first feature film, a stunning neo-noir torn between hyper-realism and expressionism, with James Caan in the lead and an unforgettable soundtrack by Tangerine Dreams. But we will also offer to our audience one of the best films by another great director, the late William Friedkin, Sorcerer, a true visual experience, an Herzogian effort, and a powerful tale of the struggle for survival that will keep you glued to your seats, stunned.
And that's a wrap on the very first episode of La Biennale On Air for 2026. Your VIP pass to the ideas, artworks, and creative mischief powering the cultural pulse of Venice and far beyond. We strapped you in for a full-throttle ride through performances that move bodies and minds, designs that bend reality, and timeless cinematic masterpieces. We grabbed front row seats, snuck backstage, and yes, got a little starstruck, meeting the creators and a few icons shaping the now. And, spoiler alert, we've barely cracked the door open. So let the ideas roam. Let the sounds and voices stick with you a little longer. Let something unexpected spark in your work, your thinking, or somewhere you didn't even know needed stirring. That's La Biennale di Venezia doing what it does best, pushing boundaries, blurring lines, and nudging you to look again. Before we drift off into the lagoon, a quick heads up. The Biennale Carnevale 2026 is just round the corner. From the 7th to the 15th of February 2026, Venice will burst with even more colours, creativity, and just the right amount of glorious chaos. Don't miss it. And hey, this isn't a one-way broadcast. Got questions? Hot takes? Outrageously bold ideas for where we go next? Drop them in the comments. We are all ears. Thanks for tuning in. This is La Biennale on Air. Catch you later. A big ciao from Venice. La Biennale on Air is a podcast produced by La Biennale di Venezia. The voice you are hearing is that of Francesca Faticenti. Mixing and audio editing are by C3, Tecnologie e Organizzazione SRL. Pinocchio, What is a Person, by Davide Iodice, is a production of Teatro di Napoli, Teatro Nazionale Interno 5. Sound design is by Luigi Di Martino, with poems written by Giovanna Silvestri. The music of Chunky Moves United is by Gabber Modus Operandi. The podcast is curated by the Editorial Activities and Web Office at the Press Office of La Biennale di Venezia. Cesare Besantis, Valentina Campana, Claudia Gioia, Ornella Mogno, and Marta Zannoner.